Takže paní Betty Ann Davis přichází místo Andreji Welling, zkušené porodní asistentky, a tady máme zkušenou porodní asistentku z Kanady místo zkušené porodní asistentky z Německa a budeme se jí ptát, jakou podporu potřebuje porod doma, bezpečný. Dále by tu měl sedět pan doktor Jones, ale nevidím ho tady mezi námi a doufám, že dorazí, ale nevím, proč nedorazil. Pak by tu měl sedět další lékař, pan doktor Vanko, který slíbil, že přijde pohovořit o tom, jakou podporu potřebuje porod doma. Nemám od něj zprávu, nevím, proč nedorazil. Omlouvám se vám za to. Asi rodí doma, možná. A dále tady máme paní Marie Milshaw. Už víte, o čem hovořila, měla tady prezentaci z Velké Británie. Máme tady Irene Walton, členku Asociace radikálních porodních asistentek, také jste slyšeli její prezentaci. No a nemohli bychom být úplní, kdybychom tu neměli někoho z České republiky. A z České republiky tady je paní Milena Dvořáková, také zkušená porodní asistentka, dlouhodobě chodící k porodům doma. A já se jich teď budu ptát. Myslíte si, že je porod doma legální všeobecně?
Tak v České republice si myslím... Slyšíte mě? Jo. V České republice porod legální si teda myslím já není, protože porodní asistentka nemá platnou registraci na vedení fyziologického porodu doma, aspoň teda v mém případě. A z toho důvodu, že nemá registraci, tak také není na ten porod pojištěná. Takže není legální.
A jakou má podporu v legislativě státu?
V legislativě státu má podporu zákonem.
Má podporu porod doma v legislativě?
No v legislativě asi ne.
V naší legislativě nemá. Do you have set? Máme tu nějakou dobrovolnici, která by přenesla sluchátka. Našel. Děkuji.
Není to nastavená, co to, když tak to.
Můžeme pokračovat dál. Jak je to ve Velké Británii? Je tam porod doma legální? Jakou má podporu v legislativě?
In England, home birth, well, in the United Kingdom, home birth is a legal right for a woman. So yes, it is legal and women can access it. It's not a problem.
A podporu má, je nějaká zákonná norma, nějaký výrok, který by byl charakteristický pro Velkou Británii, jak podporuje porod doma? Nějaký výrok, který by řekl, ano, porod žena může kde chce, nebo...
Yes, absolutely. It's in the law.
Já se ptám, protože jsem jednou viděla takovou prezentaci, kde byl kůň ve žlabu, kobylka ve žlabu, a ta kobylka rodila a u toho bylo napsáno, že žena může porodit, kde chce a porodní asistentka je povinná jí pomoct tam, kde si ta žena vybere. Bylo to obrazné a mělo to znázornit, že i kdyby to bylo ve stáji, tak prostě porodní asistentka za ní může dojít.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
A protože k nám přišel... Please. Takže to je až tak. A vítáme tedy ještě pana doktora Jonese a za chvilinku mu zopakuji otázku. A jak je to v Kanadě? Betty Ann, jak je to v Kanadě?
Am I on? So, home birth is not only legal in Canada, it's actually enforced. All the midwives are required to do home birth, and they are paid by the government to do it. And even if they want to deliver in a teepee.
Takže tady máme dva extrémy. Není legální v České republice nebo těžko dosažitelný. Je vynucen, kdyby žena chtěla porodit v týpíčku, tak...
Or canoe.
A nebo kanoi, tak může. A stejná otázka, jak je to v Brazílii? Je porod v Brazílii legální? Doma, ano. Porod doma v Brazílii je legální. Děkuji.
It's really strange when people laugh for something in another language that we don't understand. But I think it's something funny was said. The answer for this question is no. In Brazil, home birth is not illegal. It's not even illegal for doctors to assist home birth. The problem is not legal, the problem is cultural. As in many other places in the world, doctors are being prosecuted for assisting home birth. So whatever happens in a birth, it's immediately sent to the medical board. And the medical board will judge this doctor not as something that happened, but something that happened with an enemy. So doctors assisting home birth are seen by other doctors like enemies. So we never have fair judgments. We never have clear and good and impartial judgment of doctors. And that's why, one by one, all the doctors that were supporting to home birth in my country quit doing that. Even me, I had to quit assisting home birth with a midwife and a doula at home because the medical board of my city was formed by enemies of home birth. So I've been sued, and it's possible that I lose my license in Brazil in the next years because I assisted the home birth. The baby was Apgar 7 and 9, but the breathing of the baby was not safe, and he said, well, let's wait for 2 hours. If the baby is breathing well, after 2 hours, it's okay. If he's not breathing well, we'll transfer to the hospital. The baby was transferred to the hospital, and the oximetry of the baby was 91. The baby was okay. The baby was reddish. The baby was, but the breathing was not. It was moaning. We say moaning.
Grunting.
Grunty.
Grunty.
Okay.
Yeah.
Prostě chrochtalo.
And we said, okay, let's go to the hospital. Well, this baby died 24 hours after that, maybe because of streptococcus.
Yeah.
Maybe. But the fact is that the baby remained in observation in the hospital without doing anything for 3 hours and a half. They didn't do anything. They didn't do antibiotics, nothing. But the medical board decided that since it was a home birth, and since we went to the hospital too late, even though the baby was okay, they decided that I should lose my license. Now I'm appealing. So the fact is, doctors are absolutely afraid of giving support to births outside the hospital. And so there is in Rio de Janeiro even something that is illegal that punish doctors who assist a baby that comes from a birth center. So if you are a doctor and you assist a woman or a baby that comes from a birth center, you should be punished. But it is illegal, so it dropped. But the medical board decided that, against the law. So Brazil has a great problem, but we are improving because now I think that doctors are not going to assist home birth anymore, but now midwives are being created to assist home birth. And that's the hope that I have, that midwives grab this opportunity to assist birth outside the hospital.
Děkuji. A přejdu... jo?
Can I just... Can you hear me? Yes. Can I just say about what I've noticed here is that many of you countries are actually where Great Britain was in about 1900 or 1890s. We had women, knowledgeable women, acting as midwives, but we also had some women who weren't knowledgeable, and so it was very mixed. Doctors were attending births if the women could afford them, because a doctor in 1902 cost 30 shillings, which was the equivalent of a year's salary of a mill worker manager. So we got going by having the first Midwives Act in 1902, which actually set up a register for midwives and laid down some rules, for example, that they would use a thermometer and that they could read and write. Pretty basic stuff at first. Then another Midwives Act in 1918 to consolidate, 1936, 1951, and then later under the UKCC. So we have the legislation, and home birth isn't particularly highlighted because it was the default position. That's where women had babies until around about 1970, when there was a report, the Peel report, that came out advocating hospital births for everybody. And we've been having a bit of a rearguard action since then, but it's certainly legal because the midwife is the practitioner of normal, and having a home birth is normal.
Myslím, že tohle byla velice důležitá poznámka, že porodní asistentka má za úkol pečovat o všechno, co je normální, a porod doma je prostě normální. To bychom si, myslím, měli hodně dobře zapamatovat. Dobře, a tak se dál zeptám, jakou podporu nebo pomoc potřebují porodní asistentky? Pana doktora budu považovat za porodní asistentku. Mohu v tomto smyslu? Mohu vás považovat za porodní asistentku?
I'm MD, a midwife in disguise. Yes.
Jo, dobře. Děkuji. Protože tím pádem se ptám, jakou podporu by potřebovaly porodní asistentky, aby měli pocit, že poskytují bezpečnou péči při porodu doma, a jakou podporu by tedy očekávali od státu, aby mohli přijít a být prostě v klídku.
I think in the UK, midwives have support from the government anyway. But I think what they need is they need a robust system of education. Mm-hmm. They need to have a sense of identity as an autonomous practitioner. So they are responsible for the women that they're caring for. And they need support from the institutions around them. And in the UK, we've got a fabulous system called supervision of midwifery that does support the midwife to look after women anywhere. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Takže rozumím to dobře, v Británii jste spokojení. Ve Velké Británii je všechno v pořádku a jste spokojení.
I think it's difficult to say that everything's okay, of course. But I think midwives have got to be very clever about accessing what support that there is. And if they're very clever, they can have access to support. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Dobře, děkuji. Co v Kanadě?
We definitely have a legal support. You're also asking
a nejenom, not only legal, nejenom legální podporu. Nejen legální podporu, nejenom v zákonou, ale jakoukoliv podporu ze strany státu.
It's interesting. It's actually an interesting question if you just do it generally, because I think prior to legislation, which did not happen that long ago, we felt that our biggest support was our community of women. And I still feel that way. But it's very clear to me that other midwives who have not gone through the social movement that I did in order to become legislated feel that they need that. And one of the things we found as soon as we got legislated is that some of the consumer groups that we had originally worked with prior to legislation dissolved because they thought they had done their work. And I actually did a survey of the midwives to find out if they thought that now that our legislation is in and we've institutionalized the profession of midwifery, was our work done? And was the movement finished? And I was appalled to find out that they thought it was. And I thought, are you kidding me? Like, this is, the purpose of our movement is not to get legislation for midwives, it's to get women what they want. And we're gonna have that battle we've had it for centuries, we're gonna have it for as long as the world exists. So I think that the support that I really need always, and that I use always, is the women in my community. I go to them first because I want to know what they want. It's very tempting as a midwife to go and hang out at the hospital with the physicians and mosey up to them and do things that they would like so that you get more status. I've never been good at that. I can deal with them, but I don't feel that I need to pretend that I am like them, because I actually am quite happy in my skin about who I am, and it's not a physician, except the ones that are in disguise.
Kromě toho, který je tady s námi a je vlastně porodní asistentka.
Can I just say something? One of the ways that the British government supports maternity services really and the women is it has set up maternity services liaison committees, and every hospital trust has to set one up, and this has to be chaired by a lay member, a woman, and it has to have representation from women, and its brief really is to look at the maternity services and ensure that everything's going along for women, and that is a legal obligation that they have.
A co na to Česká republika?
Česká republika by potřebovala podporu od všech. Od ministerstva zdravotnictví, potřebovala by podporu taky od vlády, potřebovala by podporu od zdravotních pojišťoven. Od žen si myslím, že podporu má a že ženy náš servis vyhledávají stále častěji. Ale tím, že legislativa je zatím taková, jaká je, tak porodní asistentky vlastně pracují ve strachu. Potřebovali by pracovat v daleko klidnějším psychickém prostředí, potřebovali by podporu vlastně i té záchranné služby, a ne jako třeba já, když volám záchranku, tak vlastně ty lidi na to připravím a odejdu z toho domu, aby mě tam nenašli. Protože vlastně restrikce, které máme, nejsou příjemné.
A je to na vás, abyste se vyjádřil?
In Brazil, there is no support for home birth, and the only exception is a very postmodern hospital that we have in Brazil. It's called Sofia Feldman. It's in Minas Gerais. That was one of the first to embrace midwifery as the primary attendance of birth in the hospital. Now, most part of the births that happen in the hospital are done by midwives. And just a year ago, they created the first home birth service in the hospital. So if you are from this poor community that is served by this hospital and you say, you know what, I want a home birth. So the midwives of the hospital, they created a team just for home birth in poor communities. There is another exception in Recife, in the northeast of Brazil. That is a place that you should know because it has one of the most beautiful beaches all over the world and marvelous people. And in Recife, they created a parteria urbana. Urban midwifery is a course, a national course to form new midwives to assist birth in cities, not in farms, not in outside, but in cities. I'm one of the professors of the course. And they have practice with a group in the favela, in a slum, close to the city. They go to this place, they charge nothing just for to help these women of this poor community and give training to the midwives. These are the only two exceptions that we have services of home birth in Brazil. And the rest is independent midwives in São Paulo, Porto Alegre, Brazil, growing group of independent midwives, but no support from the government. What we are doing now with the Stork network is this network that is being created by this left-wing government in Brazil with Dilma Rousseff, is the creation of birth centers. I don't know what's the name of that in Canada and the United States, as a birth center quite beside the hospital. It's not far from the hospital. It's not independent. Alongside birth centers. Because that's the only way the doctors accepted to have birth centers run by midwives is to be close to them. So they will have, some kind of control over the work of midwives.
A to mě vede k otázce o vzdělávání. Jakým způsobem může podporod doma podpořit vzdělávání? A možná, že Betty Ann chtěla zrovna na to reagovat. Pokud ne, tak prosím o reakci na pana doktora Jense.
I just wanted to say that we don't actually have birth centers attached to hospitals. But in Quebec, two of the birth centers are the presbytery for the church, or the place where the priests used to live, attached to the church. Very symbolic. It's like, in Quebec, it's a spiritual connection with the church. People get married in the church, they have their baby in the presbytère à côté.
And sometimes they make the babies in the side of the church.
But we do have freestanding birth centers.
A tedy zpátky k té otázce o vzdělávání. Jakým způsobem může bezpečný porod doma podpořit vzdělávací systém a podporuje ho ve vašem státě? Čím je ta pomoc specifická? V čem tkví pomoc porodu doma ve vzdělávání?
Okay, first of all, in our country, we had created a kind of community midwifery before legislation, where, just checking her translation, where we realized that the most important thing for way for a midwife to learn is to be with another midwife, and especially an older midwife with a younger midwife, but certainly somebody with experience helping a younger woman. And this is the way we had seen it done all over the world. So the institutionalization of our educational system was something we really fought, because we did not want to create more ivory towers, because we knew that would just separate us from the community and the women on the ground. So I actually put out a paper just before legislation. The midwives were so angry with me because we were trying to look totally unified, and it was called Apprenticeship, Saving the Successful Tradition in Ontario. And so people bit their lips and said, okay, Betty Ann, okay, we'll try to do something like that. But that's really what's happened, is I was really concerned about going to a university level and becoming just another health professional that has so many accolades that all you think about is how much higher you are than the women on the ground. And that was so last century. It was, for me, just not what I wanted to do. And actually, talking about education, my dream right now, I teach in women's studies. I do not teach in midwifery. I'm a preceptor to the midwives, but I find that the midwifery educational program is still very attached, for my liking, a little too much attached to a system that is not open enough and not looking at the larger issues. Because I teach in my women's studies course about rape, sexual abuse, female genital mutilation, body politics, the importance of feminism, the importance of taking back our rights for our bodies. And it's a general program, not just midwifery and attending a birth, because we are dealing with all of those issues with the women that we are with. So education for me, for midwives, best on the ground. It's important for them to get theory, but I think it should not be I don't think it should be connected with health sciences. I think it should be connected in a women's studies program, and that's what I'm promoting right now in Canada, is to have it seated where it should be in a group that understands women's rights before anything else.
To je zajímavé. Teď se zeptám, protože paní Mária je supervizorka porodních asistentek, tak jak se na vzdělávání dívají supervizoři? Je dostatečné ve Velké Británii? Potom paní Irene se zeptám na tu praxi, ale myslím na praxi, co dá to vzdělávání pro opravdovou praxi, ale vás se zeptám, jak jsou na tom supervizoři? Myslí si, že vzdělávací systém ve Velké Británii vytváří okamžité porodní asistentky, to znamená opustí školu a může do praxe?
I think it's a good question. What we have in England and Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland is a unified system of education for the midwives. What all the midwives have when they're students is access to supervision. So if they're having difficulties accessing part of the training that's important to them, exposure to physiological birth, exposure to normal birth, it's not very common, but they could raise that with the supervisor, and the supervisor would contact the clinical skills facilitator to make sure that the midwife had it. But it's built into the training anyway. I think once the midwives are trained, then the supervisor comes into her own, because the midwife might be employed by a hospital on a rotational contract, which means she will do some work in the birth centre, some work on the labour ward, some work in the community where she'll have access to home birth. But if she's not getting it, she can access the supervisor to expose herself further. Mm-hmm. If she feels that she hasn't got clinical competencies to work in any of those areas, then again she can access a supervisor. Or if one of her other midwifery colleagues feels that she's not performing, or there's allegations of misconduct, she's not clinically competent, then they can use supervision as a mechanism for facilitating that midwife to get more skill.
Mm-hmm. Takže má stále možnost se zeptat na radu v případě nouze.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Děkuji. A paní Irene se zeptám, co si odnesla ze vzdělávacího systému a řekla by, že jí bylo... Co jste si odnesla ze vzdělávacího systému a řekla byste, že v tomto mi škola pomohla v mé praxi u porodu doma?
Well, I don't know whether you know, but I was head of midwifery education at the university, and I've been a midwife teacher for over 23 years. And when I first started in teaching, we worked in the unit, in the hospital unit, and we taught 1 day a week, and we worked on the wards and in the community for 4 days a week with the students. And I've lived through all the changes in midwifery education, and what we do in Great Britain is we have a 3-year programme. 50% of it is theory in the university, and 50% of it is practical in the hospital and in the community. We teach modules of women's studies. It's very, very deeply embedded in women's studies: female genital mutilation, rape, sexuality, communication studies. We really did have to fight for it. The practical is based on a normal model, going from normal and hopefully coming into the complications in the later stages of the programme. And I think the students go out with the midwives, both in the hospital and in the community, and the midwives are responsible for their practical training. So they stand and fall by their clinical practice. The teachers in the unit are actually midwives as well. So the midwifery education system is very much led by midwives. The teachers are midwives and the clinicians are midwives.
A porodní asistentka nemusí nastoupit do nemocnice po ukončení studia. Může si založit svou praxi, může pracovat v komunitě rovnou. Nemusí mít nemocniční praxi, není to povinnost.
In Great Britain, a midwife is trained to be a midwife at the point of registration. She is accountable for her own practice then at the point of registration. She can work in hospital or the community or in independent practice. And this is where the supervisor of midwives comes in as a great support. In practice, most midwives have a period of preceptorship where they're supported in the hospital and then they go in the community. But they are quite able to go out and be independent midwives, working from home or their office or wherever they choose.
Děkuji.
Can I just ask? I think the thing to remember is most midwives in England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland are employed by the health service. And if a midwife chooses to work outside of the health service, she's got an obligation now to have indemnity insurance. Independent Midwives Association in England, Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland has agreed a package for midwives that work with IM UK, but for midwives not working with IM UK, they find it very, very difficult to access indemnity, and that's a problem that's happened all over the world and is just new to us now. Do you not think, Harry?
Česká republika. Stejná otázka. Vzdělávání a jakým způsobem připraví vzdělávací systém porodní asistentku k praxi. Na porod doma, ano.
Tak já myslím, že český systém vzdělávání zdravotníků, lékařů či porodních asistentek nezahrnuje speciální výcvik k porodu doma, který je nutný. Takže porodní asistentky pak vlastním vzděláváním musí získat informace, jak si založit vlastní servis a jak vůbec během porodu doma postupovat.
Tak máme nevýhodu, musíme všechno dohánět na vlastní pěst. A jak jsou na tom v Brazílii? Porodní asistentka, když ukončí školu, tak musí do nemocnice pracovat nebo může rovnou si založit praxi, podporuje její vzdělávání v nezávislé činnosti, v soukromé praxi.
Well, I'll talk about midwives. I'm not a midwife, but since I've been married to a midwife for so many years, something I've learned from her. In Brazil, we have two kinds of midwives. We have, three kinds of midwives. We have the midwives that live in Amazon and the northeast of Brazil, very poor and inhabited areas of the country. In these places, for instance, to go from one city to the other, we need 2 days by boat. There is no doctor, no hospital, no assistance. And these women are assisted by, we used to call lay midwives, but this name is no longer used. It's called traditional midwife, okay? Or TBA, traditional birth assistants. These TBAs still exist in Brazil, and they seem to be something like 50,000 women assisting birth in these remote areas of the country. But I have no idea how they work because they live in the Amazon in the northeast, in very unpopulated parts of the country. The other two are the nurse midwives. They are nurses, like Zeza, my wife, she's a nurse. She went to university, she is a nurse, and then after that she did post-graduation in midwifery. So she's a nurse midwife, because she's a nurse, and then she finished her post-graduation in midwifery. So she can assist birth at home or in the hospital. She's capable of that, and she's allowed to do that by law. And the other group is the new group that was created 7 years ago in the University of São Paulo, the most prestigious and big university in Brazil. This is the direct entry midwifery program. So a lot of friends of mine went to the university and began a course of 5 years only in midwifery, like in the Netherlands, like in many other places in the world. So now we have these 3 kinds of urban midwives, the nurse midwives, well, it's difficult to say another name because we say enfermeras and obstetrizes. One is a nurse midwife and the other one is just the midwife. So they can work in hospitals or at home. Many of them decided to work as independent midwives and work with assisting home birth. And many others went to the hospitals knowing that in the hospital doctors won't allow them to assist directly the birth because hospitals belong to doctors. Doctors are the owners of the hospital. So even though they are able to assist birth, they are not allowed by the doctors. But in some hospitals, it's changing. In Rio de Janeiro, and in São Paulo, and in Recife, and in Minas Gerais, and in Bahia, states of Brazil, they are allowing midwives to assist as long as they have a doctor to supervise them in hospitals. But in my state, my state is bigger than Czech Republic. It's 10 million inhabitants. My state, in the south of Brazil, there is only one midwife assisting birth in the entire state, and it's Zeza, my wife, the only one that can do that because she comes along to the houses of the patients along with me. And so she was the only one. The rest of the midwives just help doctors, and they do not assist births.
Když byste měli říci ze své praxe, co vy sami považujete za nejdůležitější pro to, abyste mohli říci, já poskytuji bezpečnou péči u porodu doma. Kdyby se vás někdo zeptal, co je pro vás nejdůležitější, co byste řekli?
My attitude.
Vzdělání.
She said education. Mm-hmm.
I think it's training and confidence. And I think that I used to say to women in Brazil, when you go to a doctor, an obstetrician, the first and only question you have to ask him is, do you believe in the women? And this is a general open question. Do you believe in women? So do you believe that women are able to do birth? Do you believe that women are human beings? Do you believe in physiology of women? Do you believe that this machine that is inside every woman, like a chip in a computer or a cell phone, is able to work when it's demanded to work? So do you believe that? There are several answers, but normally the doctor will say, I don't know, so run away. But you can read in the eyes of the doctor or the midwife, yes, I do believe. I am sure that you can do that. So this is the adequate doctor, the proper doctor to assist the birth.
Mm-hmm. Irene?
Thank you. I think the most important things are, first of all, a commitment, total commitment to woman-centred care, to make sure that the care that you provide is safe, that you have the knowledge to provide safe care, and because it's woman-centred, you work with the woman. You don't talk at her, you work with her, you take her decisions as the real decisions. If you thought that it wasn't safe for her to be at home, but she wants to be at home, you provide women-centred care and you have the support systems in place to enable her and to help. And I think communication, women-centred care, choices for women, a competent, knowledgeable midwife. And after all that, the support systems as well, having support systems, having policies that you know are based on good evidence, and the other support systems like ambulances. So really it's about support systems, communication, and working with women, for women.
And I would second that. I think one of the things that really is important is that when we're looking after women, we give them a seamless service. So wherever they're choosing to have their baby, it doesn't matter. It's about having a normal birth event. And for the midwife, that means she has to have a robust education in the normal physiology of birth, not about anything else, normal physiology. Learn about epigenetics and have an open mind and always continue to learn. Let the women teach you. And if you leave them alone, they do teach you.
Já bych chtěla říct, že v České republice potřebujeme vzdělanou porodní asistentku, která prošla tréninkem, jak pracovat v domácím prostředí. Potřebuje mít dobré vybavení k porodu a také léky, protože my jako porodní asistentky v komunitní péči nemáme přístup, nemáme preskripční právo, takže sehnat oxytocin nebo metylergometrin je pro nás nelehké. Potřebujeme mít dobré vybavení a trénink k resuscitaci novorozence a potřebujeme být v pořádku jak fyzicky, tak i psychicky.
Děkuju. A když to shrnu, tak jsme slyšeli, že důležitý je postoj. Prostě se rozhodnout, chci to dělat, dokážou to ty ženy. Vlastní postoj k životu, že mohu. Od Betty N. Minimálně 2krát jsme slyšeli o vzdělávání. A důležité, slyšeli jsme o tom, že je třeba naslouchat ženám a dělat vše pro ženy. A je potřeba mít podpůrný systém, to znamená ambulance, dostupné lékaře, pokud chceme odkázat ženu do lékařské péče. A to všechno, kdybychom dostali do našeho systému, kdo může rozhodovat, prosím, zkuste, tak můžeme říci, že poskytujeme bezpečnou péči doma a pak můžeme říci, že platí všechna ta pravidla, o kterých jsme slyšeli z výzkumu, že tedy péče během porodu doma, asistovaná zkušeným asistentem, zdravotníkem, má stejné riziko jako péče v nemocnici. Souhlasíte? Dobře. No?
Less risk.
Dokonce menší riziko.
The only thing for me about education is whose education. And so when I say attitude is important, is I think the attitude is questioning authority. Questioning the thinking of the time, because after 40 years as a midwife, I've questioned every single thing I've ever done, and almost everything I thought was clear is no longer clear. So I think you have to have that attitude of always wondering if what you're doing really is what you should be doing, which gets back to you saying you should listen to the mother, because she will know a lot of that.
Well, one of the things...
Můžu poprosit? You wanted to say something?
One of the subjects that is taught to student midwives in, I think, most universities now is assertiveness. How to be assertive, how to speak on behalf of women without being angry, without being aggressive. And there are whole modules on it. And so I'm hoping that now our midwives are very assertive.
So how long has that happened?
I think the went into universities in about 1992, and it's been going on from there. Yeah, but definitely doing communication, assertiveness, teaching people, listening skills, and particularly for the very newly qualified midwife who wants to be liked. Everybody wants to be liked, don't they? You want to work in a nice situation. You don't want to rock any boats. And we teach them a lot about that now. How to point out about research without banging on the table and saying the research says this, or I don't agree with you. And hopefully the midwives are very assertive. I think we are.
Did you want to say?
I just wanted to say that I'm, like Betty Ann, I'm in the 60s. I disagree with authority. And I think that we should think first on what is good for women, and the protocols, the system, the routines must be questioned every single day. Yep.
Sorry.
Can I just say one thing about education? I think the fundamental thing of education is to develop critical thinking, and that gives the midwife the ability to look at what's around her and analyse it, and look at the policies, look at the strategy, and question it, because that's the key thing in education. Question, 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 and have exposure to experience. Particularly when you're looking after human beings, you need good, numbers. You can't just look after one woman and think you know her. You need hundreds and hundreds to really learn, because every woman's going to be so different, and you will always, always be learning that way.
Yes, but you know what happened in medical school? You are taught from the beginning to obey authority. And so, yesterday somebody was talking to me and said, I saw a professor being absolutely misogynistic and with a lot of prejudice during the class. But I didn't dare raise my hand because this professor could cancel my residency entrance. Yeah. So he was the authority and he could say whatever he wants. No one dares to question. And this is the same in the military, and this is the same in the church, and this is the same in medical school. So we are not taught to question authority. We're taught to follow the powerful people in our community, in our corporation.
Then the key for midwifery education is that you train your midwives to stand up and be brave and have courage and commitment and question.
To znamená, že...
And arm them with the tools to be able to do that. And the other thing about authority is that the hospital and the community have guidelines and policies, but those policies are made with doctors and midwives. The midwives are on the policy-making, decision-making.
To znamená, že další kritérium pro to, abychom mohli říct, že poskytujeme bezpečnou péči během porodu doma, je, že musíme být taky odvážné a zvědavé. Odvážné a zvědavé a stále kriticky hodnotit, zda naše postupy jsou správné. Dobře. Protože nám čas letí rychle a chceme dát taky prostor divákům, aby se ptali, tak já vyzývám obecenstvo. Máte-li nějaký dotaz, ptejte se.
I think in the UK that in terms of making Yep. I think that in the UK, which is where I live, in terms of making home birth more open to more women, that we need a culture change, and it occurs to me, talking to all the people over these 2 days, that obviously needs to happen lots in other countries as well. So I just wondered what ideas the people on the panel had for ways to bring about those culture changes.
I think Sheena Byram gave a fabulous lecture on the use of social media, and it's such a powerful tool. I think that's one of the ways forward for all of us, to share information and activate.
I was laughing with somebody yesterday because where I live is a very mixed area. Parts of it are very rural and parts of it are very well off. But we also have lots of areas that are council estates and people are not so well off. And we've noticed that we've got more home births coming along from the girls on the council estates. And really what they want is they don't want to go to hospital. They want to stay at home. They want all their friends to come in. They want their mum in. And then when they've had this baby, they're telling all their friends and they're saying, oh, you don't have to go into hospital, it's great. You can also smoke. But I think you're right. I think we have to change the culture of women. They've got to see it as a really good, safe option.
My idea is through social media. I'm totally addicted to social media, and the movement that we made in Brazil in 2012 was done in a night, Saturday night, Monday night, because we were so pissed off because of the medical board doing such a stupid thing against a doctor in Brazil. And we developed a movement throughout the whole country in Brazil in 12 hours, and then 5,000 people in the streets and claiming for justice. And I think that the only way, I will repeat that, the only way to make changes is to change culture, and we need to change the culture of women, the way they see themselves, the way women see their rights, instead of doing what we do now, that women lose their autonomy and lose their identity when they come to the hospital. Women need to stand up, need to speak out and say what they want, what they need, and this is how we change a culture. Pushing doctors, pushing hospitals to make modifications based on what women say they want. A few years ago, my brother, he's a doctor, he's a square doctor, he's a teacher in the very good doctor, but square doctor. He teaches in a university in my city. He said to me, you know, Ricardo, this, what you're doing seems to be quite interesting. Fighting for women, and blah, 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 blah. But nobody wants to hear that. Show me the banners, show me the banners, show me the movement. Every time I work in a hospital and I see women say, doctors say to women, you need a cesarean section, and she answers, okay, doctor, that's it. You need to shave, okay, doctor, this is routine, okay, doctor. Oh, your husband needs to stay outside. Oh, what a pity. Oh, sorry. And my brother, he was right. He was saying, I can see no women complain. There's no complaint about the way we treat women. Why would we treat them better? Yeah. So, you remember that. Remember that. The changes in maternity services and birth and home birth and hospital birth is not apart from all the things that are happening to women in the planet. A few years ago, you could not choose the husband that you wanted to. Somebody chose a husband for you. And so in the 30s in Brazil, no women were able to vote. And in Brazil in 1977, you're not supposed to divorce. Once you're married to a man, the church says it's forever. Doesn't matter if you hate this guy. And now you don't have the right to choose where you're going to have your baby. If you let for doctors to decide for you, you will have to do the baby in the hospital too, because it's too dangerous to have sex at home.
Yeah.
So, yes, it's too dangerous. Bad things can happen. So I think it's just a part of the women's movement to change the culture of birth, and it's women wanting the right for them.
Something that we've had tremendous success with is birth stories. So sharing birth stories on our internet forum, and the better stories or the stories that the mums were willing to share, putting them up on our website, because the website has more of an archival quality and it's searchable on Google. But what we've also found is sharing birth stories on other websites with other people. And something that was unbelievable, but that works so well, is going on shows like Good Morning Croatia, They love us. You know, it's touchy-feely, you come there, you say something nice, the grandmothers are watching, the aunties are watching, you know, talk shows, the 5 o'clock women's talk shows, wonderful. There was one with an opera singer who had a home birth in Croatia, and she said, when I was birthing, I was singing, and the host said, well, can you sing the song for us? So she sang the operetta that she was singing at home while she was birthing. And we know every single time when there's a repeat of that show, because we get at least 10 emails the next day. So it's shows like that, they're very easy to get on. The journalists love these kinds of stories that have lasting effects and that are shown repeatedly, especially during the summer.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that there's one of the things that we did in Canada is we started to realize that we had to disconnect somewhat from our hippie traditions and mainstream midwives. And we didn't necessarily go that far as to shave, but we ended up, we'd wear pearls and suits on media, but we really realized we needed to help women to understand that we have a Cadillac birth. And that's what's always been interesting to me about Brazil, because of course they've created the situation where it's the rich that get the cesarean sections, and that is why the poorer women want it, because they think that it's something the rich women get. And so for us, what we've tried to do is help women understand that women who stand up for themselves are much farther ahead than women who do not. And feminism is something that we really do feel is an important wedge into that understanding of taking responsibility for yourself, standing up for yourself, and that's why it's connected with the larger women's movement. And whether or not that actually reaches to the entire society or not, that's still somewhat up in the air. But I've said before to people today, or sometimes, that for us, when in what we're doing right now in trying to democratize the hospital situation, which is really what one of the physicians from Oxford once told me is really a dictatorship, realizing that it could be a democracy, means that you have to, for a good functioning democracy, you need a good electorate that actually is educated enough to understand their rights and to vote. And so if the women stand up and vote with their feet and walk out of that hospital, that is the biggest thing that we could, the biggest help that we could have our movement do. And that's probably what would be a good next media thing, is to have a bunch of women go to the hospital and walk out. There's a very interesting thing that happened, very small anecdote. There's a woman recently who was raped on a campus in Canada, and she didn't feel that she was getting the support she needed from the administration to condemn the person that did this to her, which was unbelievable in Canada. Usually you would. And the other thing that's unbelievable is that as a rape victim, she actually came out. And you know what she did? She's dragging her mattress that he raped her on around the campus. And so that every time she goes to a class, she's dragging this thing. She's really making a statement. So things like that are larger than life, that really help to they're colorful things to do, really are very helpful. We actually have a big doll that we carry in protest parades, because we go out doing protesting against the war in Iraq. And we have a big umbilical cord made of nylon stockings, and it's attached to the placenta. The placenta is a helium balloon of the world, to symbolize that we want a good, healthy, non-polluted world, free from war and at peace, to nurture our babies. And so colorful things like that, I think, are the way to really attract people's attention. So,
I agree. Is it working? No. Oh, it went off by itself. I agree completely with Betty Ann, and like Ricardo, so I sat down and I asked him exactly this question. He thought about it for a minute and he said, oh, that's easy. You had a maternal death in Israel this year? I said, yes, in April we had a first birth, 28-year-old, completely low risk, woman died from her C-section. Said, oh, that's easy. So find the family and get them into the press and have them say, she's dead because she went to hospital, and play it up. And he started giving me all the instructions, and he said, you'll have all your support in a very short time.
Well, I think we need a little bit more scandal in our society. And I need that women are the best ones to make scandals. It's essential to women to make scandals. And I remember a fact in the United States. A couple comes to a hospital, and the woman is in heavy labor, and then the nurse or somebody in the obstetric ward said, you step outside. The husband is not allowed to go into the hospital. And it was in the 70s. They were both hippies with long hair, colored skirts, and then the guy said, but she's my partner, not a wife, my partner. And I want to be with her because we did this baby together. So I want to see the baby coming. And then, yes, that's a story. And then the woman in the hospital said, no, you're not allowed to come in the hospital. It's the norm, it's the protocols, it's the routine here. Husband keep outside. Okay, so we'll leave the hospital. So they left the hospital. And 30 minutes later, she was pushing. And she entered again in the hospital, and the nurse again said, no, you're not allowed to come into the hospital. And the husband showed the handcuffs and said, okay, so if you find the key, you can unlock the handcuffs. So we're going together. No, you're not allowed. And then the woman begins to push, and the nurse said, okay. Come in. And both. And it was newspaper the next day. So we need this kind of scandal. We need to show power through this kind of manifestation. But we need to be brave, as we all said here.
Sorry, Betty, can we give the word to audience?
Hello, I just have a little thing I noticed in Czech Republic. Pardon. Mám moje zkušenost nebo příběhy, které slyšíme v České republice, že ženy když jsou těhotné, tak jsou období, kde jsou velmi zranitelné. A v Čechách se často setkáváme s zastrašováním matek. Když tohle neuděláte, tak vaše miminko zemře. A je to velmi těžké jako tomuhle čelit a ty ženy jako posilnit. Vlastně mám pocit, že ten systém je jako disempower. Já nevím, jak to říct česky. It was just a comment, I suppose.
I think one of the things we do with our women in England is we ask them to do what they call a brain analysis. If they're presented with a situation that the doctor's telling them, yes, your baby might die, you ask them to do brain analysis, and you ask them what the benefits are of whatever the doctor's proposing. You ask them what the risks are, then the alternatives. Then you ask them what their gut's telling them, that's the intuition part of it. And then you ask the doctor, what happens if we do nothing? And if the doctor can satisfy all those questions, then you've got more of a robust situation, but they often can't. So it's a little thing to tell them.
You know, the social media thing is really being used in my area, and I'm not on social media mostly because all of my support group is on social media. They created a fan club and all kinds of, like, I'm not there because I don't have time, but every time we do a birth, especially a breech birth, it's done by committee of 700 people on Facebook with the woman just making decisions. It's incredible, and the physicians don't know how to deal with it. Because the woman, she says, okay, my water's broken. How many of you have had water broken? And she puts it out on the Facebook of the Coalition for Breech Birth, and everybody starts chiming in, and there's people from all over the States and Canada, they're chiming in and helping her make her decision. And the physicians do not know what to do. And it's great because I go, oh, that sounds like a good idea. And it's really a very invigorating, and it's very good for her to stand up for herself. We've had women sit for 3 days with their water ruptured because they felt strong enough to do it. And they could not have done that if they did not have me in the hospital with them, but also this band of women. I don't even have to do a lot of work anymore.
Tam je dotaz? Já bych se chtěla zeptat.
Can I just say, can I just say one thing about that as well? If you have policies in place that advocate woman-centred care, then as a midwife, if you see things happening like that, being unkind to women, and I think I can safely say that if that happened, the midwives would take the doctor to one side and give him a real telling off. And I don't think that that would happen again. The difficulty is when it's not recognised, when everybody slips into an institutionalised way of dealing with things, and none of them recognise. So you have to keep coming back over and over and over again to women's choice, women-centred care, and looking at what you're doing and why.
Ta slova, jak padla o tom, že ženy mají vstát a říct stop, to je pravda. Aby je podpořili hlavně jejich muži, nebo vůbec muži obecně, to je taky pravda. Ale u nás to blokují politici, protože zákony zakazují vlastně porodním asistentkám, aby byly uvolněné, aby dělali svoji práci správně, intuitivně a bezpečí. Jestli máte nějakou radu, jak zaujmout, samozřejmě těmi skandály v médiích, ale jak těm politikům říct, že prostě s tím nesouhlasíme a že to chceme jinak. Protože my jsme oslovili prostě všechny politiky v této zemi, kteří dělají prostě zákony. A aby věděli o naší konferenci, protože oni ty zákony dělají, ale neví, o co jde. Tak jestli máte nějaký hint, nějakou taktiku, nějaký nápad, jak vlastně přitáhnout k tomuto tématu, aby se to prostě už nějak změnilo. Děkuji.
A vzhledem k tomu, že se nám přiblížil konec diskuze, už je skoro 5:30, tak tohle budou poslední odpovědi našich panelistů. Postupně jeden po druhém.
Okay, first of all, vote for women. It's the first thing that you have to do. And in Brazil, we're doing that in our local community, in our city. Women's groups are saying, what are the candidates that we can find that support normal birth, good hospital birth, good practices, or home birth? None, I'm sorry. But we need to find somebody. And so some politicians now, because every politician look for flags, we say in Brazil, they are looking for a flag, something to defend, because it's a niche, it's a group of people that are going to vote for him, okay? So we have candidates for the taxi drivers, candidates for the entrepreneurs, candidates for the musicians. So why not to have a candidate for women's rights? Why not to have a candidate for a good birth? And so we find in our city some people that are going to go with this fight with other people. But you know, this is only one politician with one idea. We need more women. In Brazil, I think that less than 10% of the politicians are women. So we need to bring more women to the politics. Women to fight for women's rights. Women to fight for normal birth. So that's what we have to do in Czech Republic. That's what we have to do in Brazil. Because women, even though we have this critical mass of people thinking about good birth, we need to bring that up and transform these ideas in laws that protect women and protect home birth and protect the work of midwives.
Tak já už nevím, jak v České republice zaujmeme politiky. Jestli má někdo nápad z vašich řad, tak určitě ho přivítáme. Protože ten rok byl takový přelomový. Měli jsme tady Mezinárodní kongres porodních asistentek ICM a sjelo se sem asi 4 000 porodních asistentek z celého světa a podařil se v podstatě tenhle kongres v médiích zablokovat, jakože vlastně skoro neproběhl. A stejně tak i tato konference. Takže sama nevím, jak dál pokračovat, aby se vlastně zlepšily podmínky jak porodním asistentkám, tak také samozřejmě i ženám, které jejich péči hledají a aby se jim vzájemně pracovalo dobře. Takže určitě budeme rádi za jakoukoliv radu, kterou bychom dostali. Děkuju.
I think you've just got to keep chipping away. And one of the very important things that you need to do is, if you are being told that you have to do safe practice, identify what safe practice is. There's lots and lots of literature in the international literature, for example, the birthplace study, that demonstrates over and over again that care by a midwife at home or in a normal birthing unit is safe. And lots of interventions are not safe. And the evidence is out there. So maybe it's small steps, chip, chip, chip. Do the politician way as well. Social media, anything and everything. Get that knowledge out there. What is safe?
I really applaud you, Czech midwives, because I think you've got a real battle, and I'm very humbled by your experiences. I think there's lots of you here. All of you can use Twitter. You can all put a message out there. Some of you, I think, need to go and become politicians. If you can't change the ones that you've got, become one yourself.
I'm a great believer in not just chip-chipping, but in fact strategizing. You've had 2 conferences here now. You are all ready to stand up and charge out the door and do something. So I think it's really time for you to put something out like that. We've had to do a press release possibly for the media, which is not going to pick up on it. But social media is the media of the day. That's the point for all of this. It is the media. I mean, we were going to start in my former life, I had a television show in Canada when I was like 19. I was in journalism, that's my other life. And it was a very successful show, but when we went to do a show on midwifery, we decided it was better to do it on social media. And because people don't sit down in front of a television show anymore, they don't do that. I don't know if they do that in Brazil, but they don't do that in Canada anymore. The young people don't do that. They go to Twitter and everything else, as Sheena is about to talk about, I think. But I really do think that you have to figure out a strategy right now about what you're going to do from here, or everyone's going to leave the room and not going to pick up, the momentum that you have. So my thought would be, we should brainstorm right now. I know you have to get out of here.
We have to get over here.
Okay, so to me, what I think you should do is everybody in their jurisdiction you should have a joint letter going to, do you have members of parliament? What's your, okay. So you should all be going to your members of parliament now and say that you're going to write them every month until you see them do something about it, and seriously do that. But it's not just you in your room, it's everybody that you know who's having babies, any of your clients, anybody you connect with who is part of this movement needs to know that they are part of that, and they have a responsibility to get those letters to their members of parliament. And probably also you should go to any women's institutions or any groups, NGOs, any groups that you know in your town that you think would support you in this endeavor, and do it on a monthly basis. Probably choose a day a month when you're going to bombard these MPs' offices with these letters, and continue, and then get some more colorful ideas besides writing letters. But one of the things about letters is you write the first letter and they can send you back a form letter. When you write a second letter, they don't know what to do because they already answered you with the first form letter, and then now they have to think about what they're going to tell you this time. So that's how politics works. I teach this in my class, actually. I have a whole thing on activism and how to do it. So that's what I would do. I would engage your lawyer, who is very interested in doing something around the issue, possibly of suing the government. I mean, you have to use your bureaucratic structures. That's what this is all about. Get a book called How to Start a Revolution. It's an amazing book. It's the thing that they used, the Sirs, the Egyptian Spring, all of these groups used this book. And it was how to develop your movement. But it's already started. It's very clear to me. The Czech is on its feet. Czech Republic.
Well done.
Děkuji moc krát všem přednášejícím. A Ale já bych ráda poděkovala všem přednášejícím zde, ale všem těm, kteří jsou ještě u nás tady v té místnosti, protože ještě neodjeli. Takže i těm moc děkuji, protože nám pomohli, jak si se trošičku aspoň na chvilinku sjednotit, ujasnit si názory a možná poslední inspirace, bombardujte je každý měsíc, to jsme ještě neskusili. Tak zkusíme jít do toho. A když nás bude víc organizací, bude to prima. Tahle konference byla první svého druhu v České republice a doufejme, že ne poslední. Byl to takový pionýrský pokus. Možná jste měli pochybnosti, jestli bylo všechno úplně perfektní, možná se vám něco nezdálo, ale prosím, uvědomte si, že jsme byli prvňáčci. A příští rok jdem třeba do druhé třídy a budeme lepší, anebo někdo převezme štafetu a bude to báječné. A doufám, že se tak či onak sejdeme a řekneme si, a to bombardování pomohlo a jsme o ten stupeň vejš. No. Já tomu věřím. Já jsem počítala, že nás přijde, měla jsem vizi, že nás přijde 500, je nás tady asi 200. Kdybych si řekla, že nás přijde 200, bylo by nás tu sotva 50. Takže já to vidím tak, že příští rok z nás jsou druháčci a tečka. A důležité upozornění pro vás, a prosím, hodně dobře to poslouchejte. To je teďka absolutně materialistický. Paní šatnářka odchází v 6:00. Kdo si do té doby nevyzvedne šaty, má smůlu. Takže je mi líto, ale bohužel vás musím vystrnadit. A sluchátka, prosím, nikdo nezapomeňte v tašce sluchátka. Vzhledem k tomu, že máme každé číslo připojené ke jménu, tak zaručeně budou vymahatelé vymáhat 5 000 za nedoručené sluchátko. Já vám děkuji a přeju vám všechno dobré, ať se máte hodně krásně.